we should maybe make a start. Hi everyone, welcome to GMCDP's Greater Manchester Mayoral Hustings. My name's Gemma, I'm just going to be the facilitator of this session, so I will be keeping a track of time and also making sure everything runs smoothly. Just a few ground rules to go through before I pass over to our chair, Heather. So we have got BSL interpreters available at this meeting. They should be spotlighted at the top. This is Anthony Redshaw, and Craig Brown, and they should be spotlighted at the top, so you should be able to see them throughout the session. We also have subtitles available. There should be a little box at the bottom of Zoom that says CC Live Transcript. If you click on this and press Show Subtitles, then subtitles will be available throughout the session. I just want to mention about the chat feature. So please try and keep the chat feature very limited. We're going to sort of use the chat feature if you have any problems or technical issues, and I will post a number in a minute that you can call in case chat isn't accessible to you. But please try and keep the chat just to tech issues at the moment. You will be muted throughout unless you are speaking, and that's about it for the ground rules for now. I will hand over to Heather.
Hello everyone, it's great to see you all here this evening for our disability mayoral hustings for the election that is on May the 6th. It's obviously different than what we would normally do, but as the last year has taught us, we have to make the best of the situation that we can. So as I was just saying, you're all here in our little Zoom room. For those who don't know, GMCDP has been, is the Greater Manchester Coalition of Disabled People. We've been running for 35 years, 36 this year. And we support disabled people across Greater Manchester to live independent lives and support their own lives and campaign for improvements in those. So like with the last mayoral election, we decided it was important to host this hustings so that we can hear from the candidates to know what the ideas of what's going to happen while you're in post. We did invite all candidates, and the ones that are here are the lucky few who replied. So I have my list here to introduce you all. Where did I print it out? It'll be the white piece of paper. So in alphabetical order, as always, in fairness, we've got Andy Burnham from the Labour Party. Brilliant. We've got Melanie Horrocks from the Green Party. Simon Lamproni from the Lib Dems. I did practice all of these, I promise. You can ask the rest of the team. I did. I went away and I've been practicing names and things. So if I get it wrong, let me know. Stephen Morris from the English Democrats. Alec Marvel. No. And David Sutcliffe from the Independent. No. Okay, maybe they'll show up later. But they were the ones that responded. But we did send out invites to the other candidates. And we can provide information for our attendees if they wish to know more about those. But we did provide that information.
Sorry, can you hear me now? David Sutcliffe.
Oh, so you are here somewhere?
I am.
Hey!
I am.
Oh, it's because you're not on. It's because you're not named as yourself. So our tech team will now spotlight you. So you come in on okay. In my little circle.
Yeah, just Joanne's iPhone. I do apologise.
So you should now appear. So now you're David Sutcliffe.
That's correct. Yes.
Brilliant. So David Sutcliffe from the Independent. David Sutcliffe, an Independent. Brilliant. So what we did was we sent each of the candidates in advance of this a list of questions, 3 questions, which they will now have 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes to answer, and then which we will do in alphabetical order. So that means it's Andy. I will give you the questions because not all attendees will have had these questions. So the questions were: considering the disproportionate inequalities experienced by disabled people during the pandemic, what will you do to reduce poverty for disabled people and prevent any inequalities from deepening? Question 2. There are clear examples of how care charge-free areas have worked well, e.g. in Hammersmith and Scotland. Would you commit to working towards making Greater Manchester a care charge-free zone? 3. If elected, how are you going to include disabled people in important decision-making processes? The key areas where exclusion is particularly felt are access to transport, digital inclusion, and political participation. What specific structures or policy initiatives would you introduce to address this? So, as I said, each candidate was sent this in advance, and they now have 5 minutes to answer those 3 questions and introduce themselves. It will be timed by Gemma, who has a wonderful clock. Yay! And we'll warn you when you have a minute left. And then once your 5 minutes is up, we move on to the next person. This is because we've only got a short period of time, and we'd like to hear from everybody and have everybody to have a fair chance. Is that clear? Brilliant. So going in alphabetical order, Andy Burnham, you are first.
Okay, thanks very much, Heather. Good afternoon, everybody. I remember the hustings that we had 4 years ago at the first mayoral election. I remember it very well. And to be honest, what that brought out was a lot of things that we've worked on since, particularly the commitment that I made back then to put the voices of disabled people at the heart of Greater Manchester devolution through the creation of a disabled people's panel. That was the commitment I made at that election, and that's what I've done. We've created the panel. I'm so glad that we have, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But obviously today's about making a sort of wider introduction. I also promised at that election to do other things, to tackle the rough sleeping crisis that we were experiencing at that time. I've kept that promise as well. I've created the A Bed Every Night scheme. I donate 15% of my salary as mayor to support that scheme. And we've brought about a big reduction in the number of people sleeping rough in Greater Manchester. About 500 people every night, just over, are supported through A Bed Every Night, and I'm very, very proud of that. I've, at this election, said that though we need to respond to the pandemic, and we need to go further actually in terms of tackling the inequalities that we've seen. You will know that we have recently commissioned or had an independent inequalities commission. And the agreement I've reached with the other 10 leaders coming out of the pandemic is that we need to put tackling inequality in Greater Manchester society. We need to make it the core mission really in terms of everything that we do. And our priorities need to be focused on giving all of our residents better support, better jobs, better homes, good lives for all. And that's very much the commitment that we're making as a Greater Manchester system. And this goes to the first question that was asked of us: how will we prevent the inequalities from deepening? I was really kind of taken actually by the survey, the big disability survey that our Greater Manchester Disabled People's Panel did in the middle of the last year, following the first lockdown. If we hadn't have had the Greater Manchester Disabled People's Panel, I don't think we would have heard the voices of disabled people and the experiences that they'd had. And I'm so glad we had the panel, because obviously its recommendations were really stark, or its findings were really stark in terms of the experience that people had been through. A couple stick in my head, 90% said the pandemic had a negative impact on their mental health. 56% of disabled people in Greater Manchester felt digitally excluded, and that one particularly kind of stayed with me and has informed the manifesto upon which I'm standing at this current election. So I've made a commitment to work to bring and help all disabled people online. And that's something that I feel very passionate about, because this is where the conversation is happening now. And if people aren't online, they won't be part of the conversation. They won't be able to participate politically. And that was part of the question, Heather, that you asked as well. But also services are being delivered digitally now. And it's very important that we enable people to access services to get support, for instance.
1 minute remaining, Andy.
With mental health. Okay, I'll bring it to a close. But the second thing that was asked about was transport. I believe I'm the only candidate actually to make disability a real issue in this election campaign by setting Network Rail a deadline of 2025 to make sure all rail stations in Greater Manchester have step-free access. And I'm very serious about this. I'm pleased to see Diane Shaw on this call. She and her daughter Amber really put this issue on my agenda in my mayoral term, and we are really driving it forward. And this is what disabled people need, a strong voice. You ask about care charge-free areas. London has got a different council tax base. Scotland is funded differently. There isn't the money here to remove those charges. But absolutely, I've been a leading voice for the reform of social care. Social care provided on NHS terms is something I've long argued for and did so as Health Secretary and still do now. I've shown that I will be a strong voice for disabled people. I will continue to be if you re-elect me as your mayor. Thank you very much for listening, everybody.
Brilliant. And now we hand over to, I'm terrible with the alphabet, if you can't tell. We now hand over to Melanie from the Green Party.
Thank you. And can I start by saying good afternoon, and I hope I've done that correctly. I am really delighted to be here. And, one of the proudest moments at the start of my campaign was when one of my friends, who is a disability rights activist across Greater Manchester, retweeted the start of my campaign and really just said, "You can trust Melanie, she is our ally." And you know what, I sat and wanted to burst, because that's exactly who I am, and to have it recognised by someone who I'm filled with admiration for was amazing. I do want to get on to the questions you've asked. And starting with disabled people feeling disproportionate inequalities and how to prevent those deepening, what I really want to address is the fact that it's not just an individual issue when it comes to deepening inequalities. Quite often, the impact of a disability is felt by not just the individual who has that disability, but by their family and by those who are involved in caring for them. And that's particularly hard to navigate and to find a way around when there may or may not be help available and out there, but it's really hard to access, it's really hard to understand where to get that help, and it's really hard to get that support. And Andy, Simon and myself were at the GM Citizens Assembly last night, and we heard some incredible testimonies, in particular from two mums who have got children with autism, who were not just facing the ongoing problems with getting support and access, but actually really starting to question their self and their ability as parents as a result of the inability to get help and support. And so that's just, I think, a really key part of addressing those inequalities, is to be able to signpost and support where the help is available, but also to make sure that where there isn't, or there is a lack of assistance, that is put into place. And I undertook to commit to their ask last night, which was to have employed caseworkers and to resource or train community leaders with regards to signposting and helping children with SEN and their families. And I think actually that's a wider ask that can be expanded beyond that limited sort of remit into providing that sort of support and casework for those who really do need it, regardless of what disability there is across the city region. Looking at care charge-free areas, which is not easy to say at all. The one thing I hear consistently from friends who have got disabilities is just how expensive it is to be disabled. There is an ongoing need for medicine. There are ongoing need for various supplements. There's a need for special equipment, and that's not just medical. You know, I've recently been part of a big fundraising campaign for a friend who wanted to be able to go out on her bike, an issue which anyone who's been to any hustings throughout this campaign will hear me talk endlessly about bikes. And her point was, if you want a bike, if you're able-bodied, you can go and spend about 150 quid in Holford's, in Argos, anywhere else, and you can go out and start cycling. Her adapted trike was going to cost £3,000. So just being able to do something fun and recreational and take a bit of a mental health break costs so much money, it's prohibitive. But care charges just don't even address that before you even get to looking at buying that bike and that trike and going out and accessing sort of space and doing something. You're having to provide with regards to just basic human needs of eating and washing and just having basic decency. So, you know, I'm not going to argue with Andy that there isn't we're in a different situation in Greater Manchester, but I do think we need to look at what can be done, because I don't think those things should be difficulty and leaving people without any ability to have money left to do the fun things and to do the things that they want to do with their friends and to go out and enjoy life. So that has got to be a really key consideration. And actually that moves up really nicely.
1 minute remaining, Melanie.
Thank you. Into R3, which is how do we include people with a disability in important decision-making processes. And I think those conversations are one of the ones that we would have to have moving forward. How do we look at what we can do as a solution and what can we put in place that would actually provide those issues? And it comes back to the sort of the key issue, which is, you know, that I always go by as an able-bodied, cis, middle-class woman, which is, I will make no decisions about you without you. And that's a key remit, no matter who I'm talking to and what issue I'm discussing. I want to be informed and I want to inform myself. So with regards to the specific you had asked around transport, yes, it needs to be accessible, but not just in terms of can you actually access the mode of transport, but actually, and it's an issue that's been raised with me by constituents in Bolton.
Time up, Melanie.
Free bus passes when that's equivalent, and can we do it in a way that makes it accessible? Sorry, I've run out of time.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Can we now move on to, I don't know why we don't put this on the top. Simon
Lepori.
Lepori. Hang of it.
Yeah.
Lepori from the Lib Dems.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Heather. And thank you, Gemma, for excellent timekeeping. It's pretty hard to keep us on time, as other chairs have noted. Thank you so much for having us here today. It's brilliant to see you all. I've got you on gallery view. I was one of the late confirmations yesterday because I thought it had already come through and that I'd already accepted when the original email went through. So I do apologise, Heather and Gemma, as well for that. It's been an interesting few months. I've had a lot of emails, some letters. One of the things that has popped up has been in terms of a an accessibility and disability issue has been public toilets over the past year. Some of them have been closed, and your access has been limited. And I've had a number of constituents actually talk to me about access to toilets, and that has led on to other accessibility issues. As Andy rightly says, the train stations, some of them aren't accessible. It's unacceptable. And I join with him, and I think I said at a previous hustings that we need to sort out the accessibility of our train stations. I mean, I live around the corner from Trafford Park train station, and it's not accessible. You've got wide steps. There's no lifts, no ramps. It is one of those stops that people with any mobility issue could not use. About your asks, I'm going to start with the care charges issue, because throughout my professional career and throughout now my political life, I do argue for full, free, at the point of access care, and support packages that you should not have to pay into. There are difficulties, as Andy's already alluded to. It's the way the funding is decided by local councils. It's the way the NHS builds into it. It's the way your social care providers build into it. It's not acceptable, and these are not excuses, but it will be a huge ask for Greater Manchester, because at the moment we are a net receiver, if I'm correct, or we're right on the cusp from central government. We're not a net inputter. So getting more money out of central government is, especially this central government, is always been difficult over the past 4 years, and I think it will be over the next few years. It's not an excuse. We all need to do better for you. We need to make it free at the point of delivery for you all. You should have the best quality of life that you could possibly have. The disability panel, and has already set it up. We should go further, but as I've said to other groups, keep banging on my door and kicking my door in until I listen to you. I'm not going to run away from you. I want to hear your ideas. I want to include you. I want you to feel accepted and part of Greater Manchester. So, you know, make sure, keep banging on the door, and I will listen to you, and I will include you. Digital exclusion, something over the past year that I think a lot of us have experienced. You know, some colleagues of mine in the Liberal Democrats.
1 minute remaining, Simon.
Thank you. They didn't have like webcams or know how to use, you know, video conferencing or anything. My grandmother, getting her onto a computer and getting her using her camera from her sheltered accommodation that she moved into shortly before the pandemic was torturous, but we got there. Me and my 5 cousins managed to sort it out and get her using it properly. But that just shows that we need packages to allow you to access digital education, knowledge, tech know-how, so you can feel you understand it. Because we can put together a user guide, but if you're not comfortable using that guide or understanding it, you'll need someone there to help you through it all. I'm up, but no, thank you so much for having me as well. You're on mute, Heather.
I still believe that Alec Marvel isn't here, so we're going to move to Stephen Morris from the English Democrat.
And about how that looks. These slides just start talking about all of that extensive work. It's another 40-page document, but making sure we're planning in the right way, making sure everyone
don't know who that was. You okay, Heather, if I start now?
No, I think the sound has now gone. So I think that's, I don't know where that came from.
Okay.
Wasn't me. So you can go ahead.
All right. Okay. My name's Stephen Morris. I'm the English Democrat candidate for Mayor for Greater Manchester. Disability access has made great strides over the years, but it's not gone far enough. We really need to push and make Greater Manchester fit for the 21st century. And the pandemic has highlighted a massive issue on the unseen disabilities that are out there. Many of them now are obviously with mask wearing, where a lot of people can't wear masks with hidden disabilities, have been vilified when they've been going into shops and stores where other people haven't. I remember the issues my cousin had with her wheelchair. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us, but she had massive problems with access, trying to get access on the wheelchairs. And I remember representing Metrolink when I worked at Metrolink, and we went to look at the ordering of the new trams and the authorities' issues around mobility scooters. And we raised issues with the disability groups then on how we can make them more accessible. And the authorities ordering the trams just basically ignored what we said. It still gripes me to this day because I know exactly what they said and the legislation they were looking at. And we already had the phase 2 trams at the time, which complied with it and did exactly the same thing to allow full access to wheelchairs and mobility scooters. So I've been there arguing the points way back in my transport days. But one of the things we've also got to address is the feeling of being secure and safe out there when people are travelling on transport and going out and about their normal business. At the moment, we already know that under the current leadership, the Greater Manchester Police have been put under special measures where over 80,000 crimes are not being dealt with. That was in the first 6 months. So when we're talking about possible vulnerable people or people who may be easy targets for criminals, we've got to make sure that when disability groups are going out there, that they are feeling safe walking our streets, that they're feeling safe dealing with our public transport. And then we've got to make the buildings more accessible, not just the internet revolution that seems to have gone on in the last 12 months, where we need to make sure that people have fast, reliable internet connections. But we need to make sure that the businesses are actually looking at the access points, how they can engage with the groups. And your groups are like the eyes and ears and everything of that we need to do. Having the committees are ideal because you experience this day in, day out. Me as an able-bodied person do not experience the same things. So I have to ask groups like yourself on how each individual sees things and how each individual has their own issues. And then we work to develop it. I think that at the moment, I know Andy's mentioned about Network Rail. Well, that's in his position as mayor. You know, to me, he's been in the position for 4 years and we're still arguing the point on access for disabled people. Well, come on, we've got to move quicker than that. We've got to make sure that all our stations, all our buses are accessible. And like we know at the moment with the issues on the Cheetham bus depot on the 135, they're using coaches which are not easily accessible for disabled people. You know, it's appalling. We should have easily accessible bus services, even if it's a replacement bus service. Well, a group of employees are on strike. We've got to have them services like for like. Trying to get access to coaches is not easy. So we have so much to do. There's so much been done, but there's so much that we need to do. And to me, the pandemic has highlighted a massive issue, and we know this because we've already mentioned this in
1 minute remaining,
previous
Stephen.
hustings to do with mental health. There is a massive issue developing under mental health, which is unseen disabilities. It's developing, and we know we're going to have to deal with this. 813,000 people lost their jobs last year. 5 million still on furlough, wondering if they're coming back. The massive effects on everything on our economy has to be addressed, and we need strong leadership to take this forward. Unfortunately, we've not had strong leadership, and we need to change. Thank you.
I'm on mute. You'd think I'd learn by now. So we've now got, thank you very much. And we now move on to David Sutcliffe, who is also an independent. So you've got 5 minutes. You're on mute. David, you're on mute. The joys of the internet.
Do you hear me now?
There we go. Yes.
Brilliant. I probably just better introduce myself, give you a little bit of background, because the other candidates have had quite a bit of exposure, and I haven't. My name's David Sutcliffe, 53 years old. I currently work and volunteer in food banks, and prior to this, I was an inspector with Greater Manchester Police for almost 29 years. I've got a disabled son, Joshua. Joshua's got autism. I work alongside disabled people 3 days a week. Sorry, I might get a little bit emotional here. I do apologise. Work alongside disabled people at least 3 to 4 days a week. That is people with learning difficulties and also the physically disabled. It just tears me up, really. You know, what these kids have to go through in order to get the basics of life. Just speaking on, you know, from personal experience, the PIT process. You know, for those of you who don't know, it's personal independence payments. And very often you fill in the forms. I know they haven't been doing it recently, but you then have to go down to a process in Salford very often, whereby you get assessed. And that is your lifeline. That is your money. And they make life as difficult as possible for you to access that. There's not a lot of advocates out there, so it tends to be something I've tried to do is working class people tend to fall through the cracks in that process because you can't pay to access experts, etc. I know I'm going off, but you know this is absolutely vital for parents and carers, and it seems to me it's basically a class thing. That it's you know, if you're educated upper middle class, you can drive your way through this system. If you're not, you're likely not to get your money. We were talking about safety before. You know, people with physical and mental learning difficulties, the way they get treated out and about, especially as teenagers, is absolutely appalling. Whilst we've talked about the police and making things safe, it's about us as citizens stepping in when we're seeing that type of thing happen. I mean, it's all very well as, you know, having panels and meetings and what have you, but it's out and about on the ground. If you see somebody on the Metrolink system being abused, well, step in there and get something done about it. We mentioned briefly there as well about mental illness. Something that's very, very, very close to me because I've seen people within Greater Manchester Police become mentally ill. And the reason they become mentally ill is because the lack of input, the lack of care, and people like Andy Burnham and other senior police officers who let these people rot. They have become
1 minute remaining, David.
Yeah. Andy Burnham and these senior officers have been aware of bullying, corruption, and the waste of money, and they have done nothing about it. And they let people get very, very seriously ill and ruin their lives because of their lack of effort. So, Andy, when you say that you are passionate about disability, I'm sorry, it is a lie. And then when you talk about we don't have the money.
Sorry, David.
Sorry, no.
You will get your last 20 minutes, 20 seconds, but this is not a place for attacking other candidates.
Right.
You can attack. You can talk about policies, but personal attacks is not going to happen here.
No. Well, no. As I say, it's not a personal attack. It is whereby I'm saying people are very, very ill because of lack of scrutiny or lack of oversight, you know, and it's ruined families' lives. As regards, you know, carefree, etc., we've got the profligate waste of money. You know, we've got a computer system there within the police, which has got £60 million over budget. Imagine what you could do with that. How many vulnerable people you could help if that, if projects like that had been managed correctly.
I got up here, David.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Hopefully everybody will get a time when we answer, when we have the time to answer the questions. And as I said, this is, I'm not sure if I clarified it at the beginning, this is a space where we need to clearly respect each other, and this is a space where we need to talk about the things that are happening in the lives of disabled people. So if we can bear that in mind, that would be great, because what's really important is the issues and the lives that disabled people are living. So that's where my heart lies in all of this. Is that okay? So thank you very much for introducing yourselves, and if we can, our next section will be some, if I remember rightly from my agenda, it's questions that have been, so we asked members to submit questions in advance, and then we've gone through those and we've selected questions that fit with some key issues that have been highlighted over recent times, but also to make members aware that you will have the opportunity, if people are agreeable, that we can also highlight these issues with you at a later date, possibly by email or letter, to get your opinions on those, because obviously we've only got a short period of time. Is that okay? Because we can only fit so much in so much time. So I'm going to go to my list of questions. Am I on the right track, Gemma? I've not skipped something, have I? No, brilliant.
No, we're on the tracks.
Fabulous. Is Vivian here? Vivian, her question?
Yeah, she's here now.
Brilliant. Would you like to ask her a question? I can't hear you.
It's not working, I don't think, Vivian.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay, so my question, you'll have no doubt read the GM Independent Equalities Commission report, the Next Level, good luck. And also you'll be aware of the Greater Manchester Mayor Manifesto for disabled people. As a mayor, drawing on recommendations from both of those, what do you see as the key priorities for disabled people? And in 12 months' time, what will disabled people note and say as an advantage of having voted for you? You know, I voted for X and this is what we thought. So that's open to the panel.
So each of you have a maximum of a minute. You can also skip if you wish not to answer this question. I was told that convention says that I go backwards. So David, would you like to answer this question? You're on mute.
So, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
My priority would be, and this is something I actually know about, and not something that I've read in documents. I would like to get disabled people into work by concentrating on what they can do and not what their life challenges prevent them doing. I work with physically and mentally disabled people every day. And the main thing that these people want, that we all want, is just to be treated as an individual and, where possible, you know, get the workplace adapted to this. I know in my particular case, with a physically disabled gentleman I have working in a warehouse, you know, we give this gentleman certain tasks that he can physically carry out. And with the autistic and Asperger's employees, very often we need to educate the rest of the staff in relation to their nuances, I would say, and their foibles. I went on a lot of training courses in relation to autism and Asperger's, and I've got to say I didn't really grasp it until I got up close and personal to it. But I want disabled people out there in the workplace. It's great for socialising, mental health, and the self-esteem as well. I know when
Sorry, David, it's been a minute now. We might need to move on. Heather, you're on mute, sorry.
Doing it to myself. Stephen Morris.
Yeah. I'm a general secretary of a union, and I deal with a lot of cases day in, day out of people with mental health issues, but also varying disabilities. And a few cases have really annoyed me and really frustrated me over the last 12 months. And I'm dealing with one with autism, where the person's been discriminated against, victimised and harassed in the workplace. And to me, that needs to be abolished. That cannot be occurring within, not what's happening at the moment, that's a public service one that's occurring. But it shouldn't be occurring at all in any sector. And to me, my aim is just to eradicate that. And that's my priority, because it's absolutely appalled me. When I got involved with this work, I got involved with a case in London where the council actually said, when they were trying to defend it, that the woman wasn't autistic enough. When I'm trying to, because although she couldn't eat, speak, or whatever,
it's a minute,
I didn't need
Stephen.
But that would be my priority, to make sure that kind of discrimination does not occur.
Brilliant. Simon?
Thanks. So you do 3 E's: education, employment, economy, and environment. And I want all three to be accepting and accessible for you all. I want everyone with a disability to get the education and training that they need so they can go into work and employment. I want everyone that you work with to get the training they require to show you acceptance and camaraderie at work, so you don't feel excluded. I want your environment to be fully accessible and fully accepting for all of you. And I want the economy, jobs market, to be open and accessible for you. And that's, I think, the answer to Vivian's question from my point of view. Thanks.
Fabulous. Then we're over to Melanie.
Thanks, Heather. And thanks, Vivian, for the question. Do you know, I think my answer now in March, in 2021 at least, are we in March or April? I've lost track completely. April is would be very different to any other time had we not been in COVID. And that's because I know that friends and family who have had, who've got disabilities have really taken the brunt of this last year. I have got good friends who genuinely have not left the house since 2-3 weeks before lockdown was formally announced by Boris. And that's because they are genuinely still terrified of the impact that that could happen to them because of the disabilities and because of COVID. So I think actually the initial starting point, if I were elected, would be to look at how do we deal with that as a reality? How do we deal with the issues that have come as an impact, particularly delays in medical treatment and problems in accessing medical treatment that have meant that issues have exacerbated and got worse. And that has been a very big reality across the last year.
Minute up, Mel.
I'm on mute. Andy, it's your go.
Thanks, Heather. So I agree with what Mel just said. I agree with what David said about employment support. But Vivian, if I'm to answer your question directly, what difference within 12 months? I think the thing that would make most difference to disabled people in Greater Manchester, which is absolutely under my control, would be to make our public transport system far more accessible and affordable than it currently is. I think that could make the biggest change. And it's why I'm bringing the buses back under public control so that we can link them with trams and create a London-style system over both, where you can take as many buses and trams as you like in any day and only pay so much. The commitment I'll make to you today is to work with our disabled people's panel to have an access committee with regards to the design of the buses under the bus franchising system, so that they all have street level access, audio-visual announcements on the buses, and obviously space for wheelchairs, which isn't currently available. So a much more, I want to build with you a much more accessible
up here, Andy.
public transport system.
So that's everybody who's answered that question. Brilliant, thank you. Our next question, the person who submitted it didn't want to say it, so I'm going to say it on their behalf, which is, how can we use devolution to mitigate the harm that the DWP and the benefits agencies does nationally? So, to do our pattern, but in reverse, it goes to Andy Burnham.
Well, I agree with what was said about personal independence payments before. And actually the DWP approach, the computer says no approach, the tick box way in which they kind of depersonalize things and, make people feel humiliated. So what can we do? Well, we've actually done it. We took control of the element of the work programme that supports people who've been longest out of work back into work. So we created a programme in Greater Manchester called Working Well. And it was much more about support rather than finding fault with people, much more mental health support to get them ready to get back to work. And the figures speak for themselves. We have had twice the success rate here in Greater Manchester for people longest out of the labour market in getting them back into work than the DWP achieved from their top-down work programme. So I'm really proud of what we've done. With more devolution, we could do even more, working with that personalised bottom-up principle. Thank you.
Okay, and then we're over to Melanie, if you want to answer this question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key starting point is it's not just harm that's caused by the DWP and by PIP assessments. It is absolutely dehumanising for people to have to go through those, and they are creating problems of their own. So I think the really key issue is to acknowledge that and to make sure that there is support available. There are a vast number of charities and around Greater Manchester who provide support in help in filling in forms, in meeting the criteria, and in support during the assessments and what have you. I think that needs to be supported. It needs to be better signposted, and we need to make sure that as much as possible, anyone who is going for such an assessment is properly prepared and properly supported so that they are able to cope with what's coming. And that includes warning about some of the dehumanising questions they will be asked. So if you go and ask for a mental health assessment, you will be asked why you haven't committed suicide. That needs to be clear to anyone going, and they need to have support in advance of going to know that's coming and to know how to deal with those questions. This can't go on.
Minute up.
Thank you.
Okay, if we go across to Simon.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I've seen some reactions to some of the questions and to some of the answers, and yeah, you're right. I think I can't add anything to what Mel's just said or Andy. What I will add is the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party nationally already have universal basic income on their policy books. I know myself and Mel, and I think Andy has joined us recently in saying that we want Greater Manchester to be a trial area for universal basic income, because we shouldn't be dehumanising people, as Mel has said correctly. Everyone should have the basics in life, and everyone should have access to things in life to make their lives better. And if the universal basic income is the way to do that, then so be it. And I was never really completely on board with it. It was, I was raised to go out and work and earn a full day's wage. Sorry. But I've been turned around over the past few years because I think furlough has shown us we can do it, and I think now's the time to do it.
Brilliant. If we pass over to Stephen.
Hi. I think this is one area that most of the candidates are really going to agree on, because one of the things I've consistently campaigned on is the individual person. And I'm completely against the computer says no kind of attitude. We've got to look at the individual. We've got to be able to assess them, and like I think Simon said, stop the dehumanising of the individuals. I've consistently campaigned on that throughout, and we need to make sure that you have access to all the facilities that you need. So I think really, like Simon said, I think a lot of the time we're just going to agree on this one because it is the right thing to do, no matter which party brings it forward.
Brilliant. And then David, you've already spoken a bit about this. Is there anything extra you'd like to add on to it? You're on mute.
You hear me now?
Yeah.
You hear me now? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, you can. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, having been through this, been an advocate for somebody, I found it, completely dehumanising, degrading. You felt like you were parasites. with one of the people we saw that we felt so strongly, we took it up afterwards. However, you've got to strike the on the other side of it. When working as a policeman, there was a gentleman who was on higher rates for both transport and living. Wife got paid carers, and he was just an absolute charlatan who ripped the state off. And there was absolutely nothing wrong with him whatsoever, as he later admitted to me after all his after we got his benefits stopped. But for the decent people,
1 minute. Oh, sorry, David.
Tough. It really is tough.
Okay. I was hoping that thank you everyone for answering those questions. I was hoping that we could answer more of the questions that had been submitted. However, it is now 3 minutes to 5. So if it's okay with the candidates, that we can send you these questions for you to be able to respond to it at your convenience, like it's a fun thing to do.
An honour.
But I don't know, maybe it is. I quite enjoy meetings. But and along with any other questions that have come from anybody that's here present at this moment, because obviously sometimes you just don't get it done in time before you get somewhere, do you? So I am going to draw this meeting to a close because we said an hour, and I'm going to keep our promise, not do a GMCDP tradition. So I'd love to thank you all for coming. Love to thank all of our candidates. Yeah. That's it. All your questions will be saved and set. Somebody sent me a lovely message. All your questions will be saved and sent on to the candidates as we run out of time. So yeah, so I'd love to thank you all for coming. So we've had, I'm going to do it in alphabetical order.
What will happen to the answers of those questions, or will they be made public?
So they will then, we've got agreement from candidates that their answers can then be made public, because there will be members who submitted questions who then not made it here, because we all know disability life. And then, as attendees should know, not candidates, attendees, there is an extra hour after this for us to make our questions more, have a little chat and a discussion. But so I don't do a GMCDP tradition. I'd like to thank you all for coming. That has been, I'm going to do it in alphabetical order, Andy Bolan from the Labour Party. We have had Melanie Horrocks from the Green Party. We've had Simon, I'm going to get the hang of this, Lempori. Is that right? Have I got it? Nearly? Almost? Yeah, I will get it. From the Lib Dems. We've had Stephen Morris from the English Democrat Party, and we've had David Sutcliffe, who's an independent. I'd like to thank you all for your time, your engagement and your interesting answers. It's very important that we do this every time we have an election so that we can inform and educate our members. And we welcome you to be engaged in we do in the future, because it's always so. I'm going to politely say goodbye to you.
Thank you,
and
Heather.
wish you a
Thanks,
lovely
everybody.
Wednesday evening. Bye.
Thanks,
Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.